Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to our ERP Shootout, where Sage Intacct and Business Central are going to face off today. Our presenters today are Jeff Vonasek and Lonnie Holmes. Jeff, working with accounting systems for over 30 years, he's been designing, implementing, and supporting a number of different solutions, including Sage Intacct, Dynamics SL and GP, Dynamics Business Central, and Uninet Project Management. And Lonnie Holmes from our team is a certified professional accountant and has been working in the Microsoft ERP space for almost 9 years. In her previous role, she was a controller for a publicly traded company, so this allows her to truly understand the struggles the finance and operations team have when it comes to process automation and structured reporting. So it is my pleasure to hand the floor over to Jeff and Lonnie for our ERP Shootout.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much, Angela, for that introduction. So I am actually going to get started in talking a little bit about the D365 Business Central environment and its platform. I want to focus this more on the actual visual of Business Central, so I'm going to be really light on slides, and I'm actually going to dive into Business Central in a few moments and sort of walk you through what we're talking about here. So the one thing I want to identify about Business Central, it is a very modern user interface, and it allows your users to see something in a very visual context. So we're not using a lot of verbiage and text. We're using the ability to incorporate graphics, visualizations that make things a little bit easier for people to identify and see and understand, and view some additional metrics within their homepage of Business Central. So the user interface is very modernized, it's lovely, and it's easy to navigate. The other are some of the financial reporting tools that are available within Business Central directly. So as past users of, say, other dynamic spaces like GP, you're used to using a reporting tool that sort of operates outside of the ERP system, being Management Reporter, and for those who were around in the FRX days, the pre-Management Reporter FRX. Business Central has tried to incorporate its reporting engine directly within the product rather than using a separate platform to do that. It uses mostly dimension-based reporting. So again, a little bit different than what you're going to be used to, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. But there are two primary financial reporting tools available within Business Central directly, which is the financial reporting, as well as something called analysis views, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Finally, the financial structure. This is going to be very different for a lot of people than what they're used to, particularly if you are in a GP-based environment right now. What you're used to seeing is a segmented chart of account structure, right? So you have a natural account or a main account, followed by a series of, dashes and other segments that drive your reporting. These could be divisions or departments. They could be product lines. They could be all sorts of projects. Even some people put projects in their chart of accounts, which I don't recommend, but it happens. So all of that is built into one account string. Business Central operates with one single segment for its chart of accounts, complemented by data points called dimensions, which allow us to tag transactions in the system that we can still have those data points for reporting as department and division, but how we get there and how we transact with those dimension values is a little bit different. It allows us to keep our chart of accounts far more streamlined and takes a lot of the variability out of our chart of accounts. So a very attractive option, particularly for clients who are using segments to manage variable interactions like events and projects and things like that that are always increasing the size of our chart. We've had a client in the past who did have variability in their chart, and they had something like 65,000 GL accounts in their GP environment. That's insane from somebody to manage from the perspective of financial reporting. So this is going to allow us to pare you down to a chart of account that's manageable for reporting and streamlining, but then still allow you to report on other elements of your business that are important for your stakeholders. So that is my slide. That's all I'm going to show you on the slide right now, because I actually want to go in to Business Central and show you the goods. So here we are. This is Business Central's homepage. Now, when I talk about the modern ERP interface, what you're seeing here is there's some bookmarks in here, some favorites that we can get to, we have some menu options, and we have some automatic actions that are driven right from the homepage, allowing us to get into certain functions that we may use as an individual within our role in an organization. But here's what I really like about this tool. Down here, I'm actually seeing some more visuals and metrics that are more important to me than necessarily some quick action items at the top. I actually can see what's happening in my business right from my homepage and understand what is the structure currently right now. So I can see I have overdue sales invoices to be collected. Do we need to amp up our collections metrics or processes to get some of this money in the door? We have overdue purchase invoices. Maybe a lot of this is connected to sales revenue that we haven't received yet, that are, these expenses are hinged on. So we can sort of look at those correlations and understand, does that make sense for our business? Then we've got these tiles down here that also give us some additional quantitative information, being, what sales orders do we have open right now that haven't yet been processed? Purchase orders that are open and ongoing. What do we have outstanding in vendor invoices? And here's the beauty is if I click on any of these numbers, it's actually going to generate for me a list of what is making up those values or those tile numbers. And I get lots of information in here that is really, really cool. Okay, there is so much variability and ability to personalize how you view data in Business Central. And what I would recommend is we have a session on Thursday on tips and tricks, and we're going to show you some of those additional features that I think make Business Central really stand out as a very unique and modern ERP. So this is a little bit on our user interface. One of the other things I love about this tool is this modern search feature. This is probably one of my favorite features because one of the things I learned as a GP user many, many years ago was that whenever I needed to find something, I had to either navigate to the module in which it was existing in, or I just had to know where to find it in the menus. And as a new user in GP, you wouldn't necessarily have enough working knowledge to be able to do that. So you'd spend a lot of time looking for things and clicking around stuff, which is not always a great use of your time either. Here is what Microsoft has done with Business Central is they've put in almost like Google for Business Central. So I can go in here and I can just search what I want to find. So if I want to print a detailed trial balance, I just start to type in the search what I'm looking for, and it's going to bring up a whole bunch of options that meet my search criteria, including, a detailed trial balance, a customer detailed trial balance, a vendor detailed balance, so on and so forth. So this is a very unique tool that Business Central has that I think is very useful, particularly as people are becoming more familiar with the product or onboarding on your team. If you have new people coming in, this is going to allow them to easily find information and tasks or reports that are available within Business Central. All right, so one of the other things I talked about in my slides, the actual financial structure. So we talked about that segmented reporting, that segmented chart of accounts. And what I said is Business Central doesn't deal with a segmented chart. They simply have a single segment chart, which is your main account, your primary account for your assets, liabilities, expenses, revenue, etc. So we keep this list very streamlined by simplifying it as a single segment, so that when we're posting transactions, we're still selecting only one account. But here's where we get some power in our data, and that is in what we call the dimensions in Business Central. So in here, I have a bunch of dimensions in this particular environment, one of them being division. If I click on the division, what they call the values, the dimension values, I can see the separate divisions that our business operates in. So these are our divisions. So that when I'm going to actually post transactions in the system, I can allocate those transactions to a specific division in my organization. Now, this is what leads me into sort of the next topic, which is really around the financial reporting side. how do then those dimensions get used? So the first way we can use them is in our actual financial statements, right? This is brilliant because what we do right now is we create in Management Reporter various trees that allow us to drill in and create filters around our additional segments for reporting. This is very similar, but we don't actually have to create any type of tree structure to do this. The system actually manages this right out of the box for us. So if I wanted to look at this, I'm going to actually change my parameters here. I'm going to put in a year, and I'm going to actually date this back a bit because sometimes these demo environments don't always have current data in it. And so when I do that, I then have these dimensions down here. So I can actually filter by these respective dimensions that I have. So in this case, we have projects in here. I may have this decorate office project, and this then would filter my data as it results in here by anything that has been tagged by that project. So again, without having to create a whole detailed tree structure, I'm able to just drill in, and I can do this for multiple dimensions at a time. So I could do 2 dimensions and say, well, I want to know what this division is doing within this project and get even more granular in terms of the level of detail. So this is really useful, I think, and very quick and efficient in terms of the financial reporting side. The other financial reporting tool I want to talk about is what they call analysis views. I think this is really slick. I know a lot of folks like to be able to look at their trial balance perhaps in a different way. Maybe they want to see some things in a column review. And I think this is a really neat option. So when you look at this tool, you can see right now it's going to show my GL accounts as my rows, and it's going to show my period as my columns. But I can actually change this to represent one of my dimensions so that I could actually look at a trial balance by division and understand whether that's just by revenue and expenses, or if that's the whole thing, if I'm actually allocating balance sheets to my individual divisions. I can look at an entire trial balance based on that division, simply by just changing that parameter and clicking Show Matrix. So these are some of the key reporting tools that are available. Now, I will tell you, the financial reporting tool in Business Central, it needs a bit of work on the formatting side. So they're still developing that tool pretty regularly, but it's not going to compare to Management Reporter, in that Management Reporter is an incredibly mature solution that has a lot of bells and whistles in it. What I will say is if you're looking for something comparable to Management Reporter, there are also third-party reporting tools available for Business Central, and one of them being a product called FYI Soft, which is incredibly similar to the FRX Management Reporter structure, and actually has even put in some additional enhancements to that product to even help further elevate your financial reporting within Business Central. So that is a quick overview and some of the highlights on Business Central. I am now going to let Jeff speak to the Sage Intacct comparison of this. So I'm going to pass this over to Jeff.
Thank you, Bonnie. Excuse me. Thank you, Lonnie. And let me go put on my screen here. Okay, so you all should be able to see my Sage Intacct screen. Is that correct? You may let me know if you can.
Yeah, we
awesome.
can see it, Jeff.
Great, thank you. So, somebody once told me that giving a presentation is all like having a baby. It's easy to conceive, but hard to deliver. However, following Lonnie is probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do with a presentation standpoint. So great job, Lonnie. And I'll try to keep up with the same standards that you have as well. So in an effort to see a side-by-side comparison, we're going to talk about the same building blocks inside of Sage Intacct, so you have an understanding of it and the differences with inside of Business Central. And then afterwards, I'm going to touch on some of the key factors we think make Sage Intacct more unique, or the true strengths are. And then Lonnie will come back and touch on some of the strengths with inside of Business Central as well. But we'll first start with the key building blocks. And so the first key building blocks, of course, are multi-tenancy. Sage Intacct is built in a multi-tenant environment, meaning that everybody shares the same version of Sage Intacct. It gets updated all together at the same time. Nobody has different versions. We don't have to worry about, are you in version 2018.3 or 2018 Service Pack 14, whatever it might be. Everybody's on the same version at the same time, and they all get updated together. Of course, that helps our team in supporting. It also means that rollout of new feature functionality happens automatically for you. And so that's just built in. It's also a modern, intuitive interface, I believe. And so you'll see, as I demonstrate it, we're going to do it through Internet Explorer, Microsoft Edge. So you'll see that crisp, clean look to it. And it also uses, has very strong financial reporting and also extensive use of dashboards for reporting and presenting data for consumers of that data. So we did talk a little bit about the multi-tenancy and that upgrade, and the upgrade really is that simple. It just happens on a scheduled basis. You come in on a Monday morning and it's done, and everything works. Everything that you have built into side of Sage Intacct works. Any third-party products you may have all work as well. It's just very seamless and intuitive in its upgrade process. Sage Intacct also is built off of what I call standard chart of accounts. So for those users who are, say, SL users, you're familiar with the idea of your account structure, your accounts being stored in one table and your sub-accounts being stored in another. If you're a GP user, you understand how your chart of account has a segment to it that's your natural account, and then you have the other sub-accounts associated with it. Sage Intacct creates a separate list of natural accounts, very clean chart of accounts, so it's not intermingled with the other dimensions that may be built, say, in the GP world. And then it tracks dimensions. This is very similar to Business Central. We use the same terminology, but you know, dimensions are really a way of coding a transaction to a different dimension within side of Sage Intacct. So every transaction gets coded to that dimension, and it is pervasive throughout the system. Meaning, when I tag a transaction, say to a specific customer or employee or item or fund or program, it flows into the general ledger and it's pervasive. So a little bit about the way we think of dimensions. Again, dimensions are a way to code a transaction to a dimensional value that you then would want to report off of. They are analogous to the sub-accounts inside of Dynamics SL. They're analogous to the other segments of your chart of accounts inside of a GP, so they're a replacement of. And dimensions bring things like what happened. So certainly account and restriction will tell us that. Where did it happen? What company location did it happen? What program division? What project or grant? What department? And then who performed this? What employee? What vendor? What customer? These are all carried inside of dimensions. And so let's put that into action and take a look at it. So I have up here Sage Intacct, one of the dashboards I've landed on. I'm going to go to one of my companies called Forward.org, and we're going to go ahead and run a general ledger report where we'll see all these pieces put together. So I'll go ahead and do the, there we go. Go ahead and run my general ledger report. And you'll notice that when I run the general ledger report, I have the ability to filter on those dimensions. So I can run it for a specific department or a specific fund or a specific program by a specific customer, so on and so forth. Now, I'm not going to do that because I want to see all my transactional data, but I can filter it. So I could change the report to meet whatever my particular need is, whatever I'm trying to focus on. And then down here, I get to decide which of those dimensions I want to show inside of my report. In this case, I'm going to show department name, fund name, program name. I'm not going to choose site, for example, or vendors or customers. Those are all good. We'll go ahead and choose view, go ahead and view that report. And you see across the top here, I now have that dimensional value. So I am running a report and reporting on those particular dimensional values. And if I scroll down here, a little closer where I'm looking at service fees, I can see specific service fees. This is revenue that I've generated for the organization. I get to see what department it lived in, what program it might be in. If it was for a project or a grant, I'd be able to identify that as well. And of course, I have my drill down capabilities to drill into the original transaction. In this case is the AR invoice associated with that particular transaction. So those dimensions are pervasive, used throughout the system, and they flow down into the general ledger, which a little bit later will show how in financial reports you can then report off of those dimensions. Maybe do a report off a customer or a vendor if you want to. Let me switch on over to another company. This is a services company called Qubit. And in this company, I have a dashboard that's set up for a controller. And a couple things I want you to notice about these dashboards. The first is you can choose to display financial reports on the dashboard. So this is the balance sheet for the organization. This is the profit or loss. And you have the ability to drill into the details of those directly from the financial report. So I can drill into it, see the activity, and if I want to drill into the utilities, then I'll drill into the actual journal transactions that make up those utilities. So dashboards are generally built for specific roles. So this role is the controller role, but you may have a CFO role, you may have a program manager role, you may have a project manager role, you may have an AP manager role, and you can display different elements on that dashboard that can help them decide what kind of activity they may need to take today, where they might need to necessarily focus on their activities. You'll also see that dashboard can include things like metrics. So what's the performance of the organization? These can be both statistical information as well as financial information. So you can display your key indicators, for example, on side of the dashboard. And of course, it's all drill downable as well. Drill downable, is that a word? You can all drill into that, into those transactions to see exactly what's making up the numbers you're seeing inside the dashboard. So very strong. Tomorrow, we'll be doing a presentation on visualization, which will show how we can create visualizations of data, and we'll put those on the dashboards as well. But the idea of a dashboard is that it puts at your fingertips the key metrics that you need to help decide the health of the organization and or where you might need to focus your activities today based upon the performance of the organization. And you can make those dashboards your landing page. So when you come in to Sage Intacct, you say, I want to land on this page. You can build landing pages for financial report users, so just consumers of data, where they land on a specific set of financial reports that you want to present to them, and they can then begin to drill into the details, look at their budget versus actual, and that sort of stuff. Which gets us to the topic of financial reporting. So we'll get back over to Qubit here, and let's go to reports and go to financial reports. Take a look at some of the financial reports we have out here. Financial reports are simple and straightforward to develop. I believe so. And a very powerful tool. So we find many of our customers can use the financial report writer out of the box with Sage Intacct. We do have other tools like FYIsoft, as Lonnie had mentioned, that are very management report like. So if you want to use that, you can do that as well. But many of our customers have decided the financial report writing tool inside of Sage Intacct is enough, gives them everything that they want. And so building a report is pretty straightforward. Let me do profit and loss by location here. And we'll go ahead and edit that report. And the building blocks are probably very familiar to you. You know, what are the rows? What do I show on the left-hand side of the report? Do I show the account number? Do I show, you know, that sort of stuff? How are they summed up, so on and so forth? And then the columns. The columns are showing me what kind of information I would show when I show account name. And we have this concept here of expanding by one of the dimensions. So in this case, what I'm going to do for the financial report is expand by the dimension called location, because I want to see the P&L for each one of the locations that I have with inside my organization. And so I will do that by hitting preview and take a look at the live report. And we get this financial report. So I can see I've got a location, Alexandria, Arlington, Qubit headquarters, and then all of them added together, so summarized together in a financial report. I have all that same sort of drill down capability we were talking about before, so I can drill into the details and find out, you know, all the activity that's going on in those particular accounts. But all that data is coded by a dimension we call location dimension, which is then driving what kind of, where the activity is being posted into that report. Now let's switch this around a bit. So we're going to cancel this, and we're going to go back to profit and loss, and we're going to do this one by customer, which is something interesting. Go ahead and run it. And now what I'm doing is I'm asking the report to, excuse me, I got to get to a specific location when I run that, which is we will go to Qubit HQ and say, okay. Now what I'm doing is I'm running that report, that same P&L report, but I'm asking it to create a column for every one of my customers. Now, you may have a lot of customers, the report might get fairly big and sizable. Inside of Sage Intacct, we use the concept of grouping items together. So groups are different things. So I may have a class of customers I want to group as a specific class. So I want to see this class of P&L versus that class, and so on and so forth. But what this demonstrates, I believe, is that the dimensional data, in this case, the customer data, is all being tracked all the way down to the general ledger, which means that any dimensional value I configure and build inside of Sage Intacct is available for financial reporting. And of course, all those financial reports can be put onto the dashboard. Somebody once said it best, and they said to me best, at least I thought it described it well, and that is that Sage Intacct's general ledger isn't. And what they meant to say is it isn't general, it's very detailed. Every transaction has got every dimension, and that all posts to the general ledger, which means that I can now use financial report writing tools, which I'm generally comfortable with, and many of my customers are, to produce all kinds of reports, vendor reports, customer reports, item reports, project reports, all that kind of stuff that maybe you had to go into a subledger to be able to generate a report. And you weren't necessarily that comfortable with the report writing tool in, say, Dynamics SL, Crystal, for example, to be able to build the reports you want. Instead, most of my customers are now using the financial report writer to generate those types of reports that they want out of Sage Intacct. And that's a very powerful feature that I think is useful to consider. So let's go back now to some of the strengths of Sage Intacct. We're going to touch on a couple of these. So the first that we mentioned was multi-entity management, intercompany transaction. So Sage being built as a multi-entity environment has great strength with respect to companies that have more than one company and want to share transactions, share things across those companies, share charts of accounts, share departments, share customers, vendors, that sort of stuff. Secondarily, Sage Intacct has built a series of quick start templates. These templates are built around specific industries, and built around those industries, it then comes preloaded with some financial reports that are built around that industry. So for example, there's a nonprofit template that has a series of financial reports that are all built around nonprofits. It also has a professional services, as well as a franchise template as well. So there's a series of templates that we call quick start templates, and they're quick starts because out of the box it gets you a series of financial reports, excuse me, without any need to build those to come out of the box together. So let's take a quick look at that, just a little bit about how that works. So let's go back to Qubit and let's go to General Ledger. And first I'll start with the entities that make up Qubit. You'll notice that this organization is made up of 3 entities. There's entity 100, entity 200, and entity 300. And I can easily bop around these entities by simply clicking on them. You'll notice a new tab opens up. And now I'm drilling, we call it sliding into, what we're sliding into this entity called Qubit Investment. If I want to go to another entity, Qubit Production, I click on it and it opens up another tab for me, and I'm sliding now into Qubit Production. And this being a true browser-based environment, I can pull this out and pull this out and compare them side by side if that's what I want to do. So for example, if I'm interested in taking a look at a general ledger journal entry, I want to build a new one. It looks a lot like one that I had in another system, excuse me, in one of the other entities, which is this entity right here. Then I can easily go into, where did you go? Where'd you go? I can easily go into Cupid Production and then be able to observe that or take a look at that journal entry. So here's my general ledger and the journal entries that I have, not my general ledger accounts, Jeff. Let's try again, general ledger and the journal entries I have there. And this is a general journal, and I can go ahead and view it. And maybe I want to code my rent, make sure I code my rent expense the same way between those two different entities. So this interoperability between entities is pervasive throughout the system. Now, you'll notice that when we started here at something called the top level. And top level is a place where all the children entities are listed below it. And anything I create at the top is shared down throughout the other entities. So if I want to standardize my chart of accounts, if I want to standardize my departments, if I want to use a common set of vendors, a common set of customers, I create them at the top, and then they are used throughout all the entities within inside of the organization. If I go into the entity itself, we call sliding into the entity, and I create a customer or vendor, then I'm privatizing that item, and it can only be used within inside that entity. So you kind of have the best of both worlds. You can share some things, which a lot of organizations do. They want a standard chart of accounts. It creates financial reporting consistency, also allows consolidation to be a lot easier as well. And doing that at the top helps. But then there may be some elements they want to have specifically at one entity, which we slide into that entity, we create that vendor or customer, and it's privatized to that vendor or customer. Another thing that that because we are multi-company enabled is the idea that intercompany transactions are handled seamlessly with inside of Sage Intacct. So if I go to my general journal, the top level, and we take a look at this rent transaction, you'll notice that this transaction is being split across multiple entities. I'm distributing my rent across different entities. And because I'm distributing across different entities, but the owner of this transaction is Cupid HQ, Sage Intacct will automatically create the dues and due funds for you, balancing out those two entities. So it's very strong with intercompany, and it's also handles all the dues and due from transactions for you automatically. When it gets to financial reporting, we can produce financial reports. So for example, I'm going to go back to reports and say financial reports, and I'm going to do a profit and loss report. There we go, budget versus actual. And I'll go ahead and it's a graph. I need to be financial reports. Sorry about that. Well, I was lost there. Okay, so profit and loss. So I can take a look at profit and loss detail. And when I run that, I can run it by any specific location I want to, Qubit, as we talked about, or production. Or I can create a group of them. In this case, these are all the Canadian companies, and look at a consolidated financial. Now I have a consolidated financial, which is broken up into transactions that are coming across those different entities. So you see the two different locations that I have there. And I did all that without having to do a consolidation, merely by the fact that we're all within inside of one container, and I've coded a dimension that is our locational dimension. I can set one or more of those dimensions together to do a consolidated financial report without any changes to do so. Sage Intacct also handles multi-currency quite well. So if you do need to do consolidated financial reports into one standard currency, US dollars or Canadian dollars, for example, you can do that using a module we call global consolidations, which will essentially consolidate non-base currency entities into the base currency you want, so that you're doing apples to apples comparison inside a financial report. And then the final feature I want to make sure we touch on is the idea of the templates. We see this by going to our general ledger. So I'm going to go to my general ledger and go to my chart of accounts. And I'm just going to edit one of these chart of accounts. And you'll notice that this bank account here has been given an account type of, given a quick start category of cash and cash equivalencies. And you'll notice that there are a whole series of account types here. If I go back over to forward, which is my nonprofit organization, and I take a look at it and go to general ledger and chart of accounts and edit the operating cash, you'll notice I have a different set of quick start categories that are specific to that industry. So what that means is that I can use whatever charter account I want to. As long as I code it to the right quick start category, it will fall in the predefined financial reports that have been built for me and my industry, whatever it happens to be, and are built on best practices inside of Sage Intacct. That's why they say quick start, because if you code all of your chart of accounts to those quick start categories, then your financial reports come right out of the box. And if you look at the reports that are there, they're all built around your industry model, whatever that might be. So for example, for nonprofits, you see we have a number of FAS, statement of activity, statement of financial position. These reports that we typically have to generate are all pre-built in the system for you. Now, it doesn't mean you can't produce your own financial reports. You certainly can, but it's a leg up. It's a head start on your financial reporting by getting these industry standard, really sort of out of the box type financial reports. The final thing I want to touch on is that Sage Intacct also has a very tight Salesforce integration, and that is begotten from its roots, developed in the Silicon Valley area, where they've collaborated with the Salesforce team for quite some time. There's a native integrated Salesforce integration that handles the whole order to cash process, flowing data back and forth between Salesforce and Sage Intacct. And there are some co-developed products. So if you are using Salesforce and using a product called Chatter, which is a way to communicate back and forth to people about customers, items, things like that, there's a co-developed product called Collaborate, and that those two systems talk to each other, so it flows data back and forth to each other. So you'll find that integration with Salesforce is very strong, and is an area where Sage really shines. So those are a highlight of the basic building blocks of Sage Intacct and how they compare to Business Central, and then some of the strengths of Sage Intacct, which again, multi-entity, multi-company, multi-currency, financial reporting, and the ability to use dimensions and build them into your financial reports. And then finally, templates that are built specifically around my industry to get me quick started, and then integration with Salesforce. So now I'm going to turn this back over to Lonnie, who's going to finish off by discussing the strengths of Business Central.
Thanks, Jeff. So, I mean, as everybody can see, Jeff really knows his stuff here on the Sage Intacct side, and has really given you a really great overview of some of the key strengths that Sage Intacct can offer. From my perspective, I'm not going to be able to demo a whole lot because I know we're getting close to the end of the presentation today, but I do want to show you at least one thing. So I will talk to a couple of things in terms of what Business Central has in terms of key strengths. One of the main strengths Business Central really focuses on is their distribution and warehousing side. It has a very comprehensive and complete distribution module that's even complemented further by an advanced warehousing functionality that allows you to create parameters around what is required from a warehousing perspective. They've created roles that are specific to warehousing employees that would be part of the shipping and receiving process to limit their views and also give them information that's really pertinent and relevant to their job, understanding what expected shipments are to be coming from vendors, what expected shipments are supposed to be going out to our customers. There is also some basic production functionality that exists. So if you have some simple bills of material for the building of finished goods inventory, you can create your own BOMs in Business Central. And it also has a more comprehensive manufacturing solution as well within it. So if you have a little bit more complex manufacturing structure, there is a manufacturing module that is available within Business Central. Obviously, one of the strengths of Microsoft is its massive suite of products, which includes obviously your Microsoft Office space, your Outlook, your CRM and sales integrations. All that stuff is in the Microsoft space. But in addition to that, Microsoft has an enormous partner network all over the world. And most of those partners are not just resellers, but are also developers of additional products and enhancements to Business Central. So Microsoft's strategy around Business Central was, we're going to build a core product that can service almost any customer from a base core perspective. And we're going to allow our partners to do what they do best and develop products that will then enhance Business Central to meet certain industry verticals. So if you are, in a nonprofit, Sage Intacct may be a great option because some of these things are built in for you. But there are also third-party products within, the Microsoft space that could complement Business Central and add enhancements that may meet your industry needs. So there's lots of options to take a look at when you're looking at which ERP would be a good fit for you. And those are some of those things. The last thing I want to talk about, and I know we're running short on time, so I'm going to talk about it really quickly, but I do want to show this, is the full mobile app. So Microsoft has taken this a step further and has allowed you to actually use Business Central in a mobile application, and a traditional mobile app as you're meant to see it. You would download it through the App Store or App Source, and you can see it on my screen here that I am actually in Business Central on my mobile phone. And what you're seeing here is exactly the same view that you saw me show earlier in terms of my dashboard. In terms, it's giving me some of those metrics that I had, my overdue sales, my overdue purchase orders. I can actually click in here. There are my favorites or bookmarks that were at the top of my page. And there are some other elements that I can get into, some visualizations. I can connect Power BI into my Business Central platform and be able to look at some visuals and dashboards directly in here right from my phone. So for those people who are on the go, your executives who need to be able to do things on the fly, even things like approvals, if you have workflows that are part of your governance process and matrix in terms of approval of purchases, and those people are not always in the office or not always readily available near a laptop or computer. If they've got a phone, they can go in and process those through an automated workflow right from the mobile app, and it's included with your licensing. So as long as you're using a licensed user within the app, they'll be able to launch it right from their phone. So a really slick tool that Microsoft has added for you as well. So that sort of was really rapid fire on my side, I'm sorry, but I didn't want to go too far over time here. So I will hand it back over to Angela, and she can wrap things up for us.
Thank you very much, Lonnie and Jeff, for that great presentation. Thank you very much for joining us.